This week on the Lightwave Paperback Podcast, Roadside Picnic. In the sprawling expanse of speculative fiction, Roadside Picnic emerges as a seminal work crafted by the Soviet literary duo, the Stokowski brothers, heralding its debut in the tumultuous year of 1972. Within the confines of the narrative tapestry, we are beckoned into the fictional universe where the enigmatic extraterrestrial entities, colloquial christened visitors, grace our planet with a fleeting visitation. Yet their ephemeral presence leaves behind the haunting legacy, zones of peculiar artifacts rife with eerie and perilous anomalies that defy comprehension. It is within these enigmatic landscapes that the contours of humanity's existential dilemma and inscrutable mysteries of the universe intertwine, beckoning us to ponder the very fabric of our reality. Hey, what's up? So this week I read Roadside Picnic, which is a Russian novel that was published, I think it was in the 70s. It's been translated a few times, and the copy that I read translated in like 2012, so it's been translated multiple times. I do not know what the difference between the translations are, and I'm not sure why it was retranslated. Perhaps it was needed, or the publisher wanted to do it. I'm not sure what the purpose was. I haven't seen anything online about why it was translated twice. There's multiple introductions to the book as well, so depending on what copy you read, there are different introductions. The copy that I read, the introduction was by Ursula Le Guin, which is a famous science fiction author, of course, that wrote Left-Handed Darkness and Dispossessed, so certainly good to have that name in front of your book. And then also, I believe, I can't find a copy online, and I can't seem to find a copy in print. There's also one where Theodore Sturgeon does an introduction, but I can't seem to find that introduction anywhere online. It would be interesting to see how the introductions are different and what it is that they're pulling out of. What is this book about? Well, I think if you read the description, like if you go and look at even if you look at the back of the book, what it's going to say is this book is about alien visitors that come to Earth, leave behind some artifacts. That's generally what it's called. They leave behind some items and then they disappear. The items are in these places called the zones, and eerie things happen in the zone. So that's what the book is about, I suppose. So if you read anything about this book, generally the aspect of the extraterrestrials is hit really hard. It's really prominent in promotion for the book. This is what this book is about. So that's what you read. If you read the book yourself, it's very easy to figure out that has nothing to do with what this book is about. That was strange to me. So I'm reading the book. I don't know anything about it. It was just suggested to me. I've only learned a lot about it since I've read it. There was a famous film, which I have yet to, as of this recording, to have watched it. I have not watched the film yet. It is supposed to be a masterpiece. I had either never heard of it or was uninterested when I heard of it whenever I did, but I've never heard of it. So the film is called Stalker, and it's roughly the same story to my knowledge of what I've read as far as that. And then also there's a video game series, which I had no idea about, called Stalker, which, judging by the videos online of the video game, it looks like it's some kind of like Call of Duty, but you're also kind of doing like searching for items and stuff like that. So, I just watched a few minutes of online videos of people playing the video game just to get a sense of what the game would be like, and it doesn't seem like it's based on the story or the characters. It's just more of the atmosphere, and then it looks like you are going into maybe the zones and collecting items, but then there's mostly of the videos I saw of the video game were of people shooting guns and like Call of Duty or something like that. Like, it looks like a first-person shooter to me. But I've also seen a lot of people commenting that played the video game, didn't realize it was a book, and then they read the book after playing the video game. So it does seem that video game calls attention to the book itself. So again, what is this book about? At first, when I was reading it, I didn't realize when it was written, and I thought it was a critique of maybe what had happened in Chernobyl. It just seemed like the alien artifacts and the way scientists were handling this technology that is just seemingly left here seemed like it was actually a criticism of nuclear science, and I thought, oh, this is probably written after Chernobyl, the Chernobyl incident, and this is some kind of criticism of that. And to my amazement, it was written more than 10 years before, like almost 15 years before the Chernobyl incident, especially since it just seems like the book is a criticism of not necessarily so often in the States, especially when I was a kid, if people criticize nuclear power, usually the criticism, I'll try to boil it down to what this is not. Usually the criticism was it's unsafe, it damages the environment, and that type of thing. That is here, but that is not the argument. The argument is almost that science itself puts such a precedent on achievement, on discovery over human beings. If that, which is, I mean, it takes a whole book to even try to get to that theme, but that's what the criticism is about. So the radiation is a symptom of the problem. It's not the problem itself. So the book is not, I don't take it as a direct criticism of nuclear power, but nuclear power, radiation, creating environments that are uninhabitable for human beings is a symptom of a problem, okay? And I've also kind of gathered that maybe that this book was written as a science fiction novel because if it was just simply written as a criticism itself of the state, the government, the people in charge, that the writers most likely would lose their lives for writing such a thing. So I think that maybe this is just a loosely veiled metaphor for what's going on, and I don't know I don't know very much Soviet history of this time. I can only imagine, but I don't know. So I don't know where the criticism is coming from. But from the book, it's not even necessarily set in the Soviet Union. It's set somewhere. Okay, so is that on purpose? Is that we're not supposed to think of the Soviet Union, or is it it's not the Soviet Union, so the government officials can't be upset that we're criticizing it? I don't know. It could be actually placed in. It's possible it's placed in Canada, somewhere in Canada, but I don't think it matters. It's anywhere. And so what is it about? It's about a couple guys that for work they go in the zones, which is filled with we could just call it radiation, but it's some kind of distorting effect by these alien artifacts. They go in there, they search for items, they search for leftover pieces, and then they basically risk their lives to get it, and then they sell it, and so that's how they make their money. And I just think, these guys are, they're just working poor. That's who they are. They're just struggling to survive. They're, where I'm from, we would call them scrappers. So these are scrappers, just guys that go out and get copper, steel, they go through the dumpster, they get what materials they can to resell, that kind of thing. So that's what these guys are doing. And the book is also split up into the main character. It kind of jumps into his life. So, the first section and then the second section will jump maybe like 10 years after that's happened. And then the next section is, I think, 20 years. And you're starting to see, how that's affecting his life, but not just, the radiation, or not just, he sees as time passes how people are different. This is, it's hard to describe, but this book is really about like the human condition. It's about how people are over time, the way society is going, and massive criticisms of science and the scientific method, and how it kind of rules out it can be inhumane sometimes. And that's what this, it's a science fiction book that's saying that, hey, sometimes science is inhumane and it's so cold and so impersonal that it's forgetting that it's dealing with people, like real human beings, and it changes people, right? And that's not something that people want to hear. That's not something that people want to promote. The thing that people want to promote is that science will breed new technologies, and those new technologies are going to make your life easier and better, and make your kids smarter and their lives better. That's what people want to hear. They want to hear that. That's not what this book has to offer. This book has to offer that there's a double-edged sword here. Yeah, you're gonna get some wonderful things, but maybe they're not all so wonderful, and maybe it takes as much as it gives. So that's really what the book, I think, is about. Very hard to describe. Terrible book to pick to try to make a podcast about, but it's beautiful and it's very deep, and all of that I just described is it is actually said maybe at the very end of the book when it's kind of tying itself up, but it's never explicitly said. It's all just through conversations of these guys going out. You can just think of a couple guys in a pickup truck going in this dangerous area, and the conversations they have, the arguments they have, the life they have, have, the relationships they have. They're working out there. They're trying to get by. They're struggling. Their relationships, Redrick is in a relationship with a young woman, and then they have a child at the end of the first section. And then there's a skip, and then, his daughter's growing up. And then the last skip, he's watching how men coming into this profession they're just totally different. They're just different than the way they used to be. And that's something that as you get older, you just notice how things are so different from when you were, the way adults were when you were a kid. It's totally different than the way adults act now. And it's the same critique that everyone says now post-COVID of how men act differently, women act differently in the workplace. They act different. Just that critique is what this book is about. And the book offers that the reason of that occurrence is that science and technology has a price, and it has a price that's very subtle. It's a price that's over generations, that it takes something away. It takes their humanity away. So that's more of what the book is actually about. So yeah, it's a science fiction book, but kinda. It's a book that I need to read again. I read it and I finished it, and I was so thankful that at the very end, the main character Redrick, he's just at his absolute wit's end, and he goes on these rants, and he kind of explains to you what the book's been about, and I really appreciated that. I was like, oh, thankfully, they're just telling me, as opposed to, and who knows with the other translations or what the book was like originally. I would be very interested to know, what. But then again, the culture is going to be so different. But what is it like reading a book like this in its original Russian? Like, what is that like? And from my friends that actually learned Russian, they said, Russian's one of the most difficult languages to learn. So I would imagine it's also one of the most difficult languages to translate. I have many friends that have learned Russian, and they all have consistently told me it's the hardest one ever. And that's even friends that are, not even just native English speakers, but other languages. It's supposed to be quite difficult to learn. So I would imagine it's quite difficult to translate. That being said, this is a book written in the Soviet Union in the 70s. It very much reminded me of adults I knew in my childhood, friends of my parents, that kind of thing. People struggling to get by. So, I think once again, we notice that things change, but humans are roughly the same. And even in different environments, human nature is pretty consistent with, the situations they get in and the situations they create. So I don't think, even though it has everything to make it seem like this would be an impenetrable text, I think it's great. And I think it deserves all the praise that it gets. I wish I would have read it earlier. That's my only disappointment. I wish I would have known about it earlier. But it's great. I wish it was held with the same esteem as so many sci-fi novels are these days. But I think the thing it has going against it is that it's critiquing science as opposed to upholding it as a religion of some kind. That science and technology will save us, when the truth is science and technology is just us and what we hold values. And if we uphold it as opposed to human beings, there will be a price. And that price is our humanity. And that's what this book has to offer. And things like The Martian, are not going to do that, right? Things that uphold, science and technology as the savior is what is popular, is what is appreciated. So many science fiction books uphold technology as the savior and human beings as the villain. And this one does the opposite. Not that I'm really oversimplifying it. It doesn't hold it as the villain, but it just has that criticism of, what are you doing to us? What is it that technology is doing to us? It's going to take a toll on our environment. We see that now with, all of the, anywhere you are in the world, there is environmental catastrophic events going on, no matter where you are. It's everywhere on the globe is being affected. What's affecting the progress of science and technology is affecting the earth. It can create stuff. It's one of those things. It's like, well, you can't critique science because it creates medicine, and, more people are able to live more fulfilled lives with it. Yes, that's true, but it also takes something away. And sometimes it's just out of our control. We don't even have control of ourselves with this, right? It can take generations before we figure out what it is we've created, okay? Of course, we can talk about nuclear science because it's such a spectacle, with a bomb or, with a nuclear power plant melting, and then they have to figure out over generations how to fix that problem. And I just assumed that this book was a critique of the, tragic event in Chernobyl, but it was like 13 years before that happened, something like that. So imagine that. It was way before, more than a decade before that even happened. So yeah, good on them, huh? I also don't understand how two people can write a book. This was written by a pair of brothers. I don't know how that works. I've never understood how that worked, and it probably depends on the team working on it. So, I don't know. But this was written by two brothers, and from what I could read, this was written as a side project of another project they were writing, which was called The Doom City, which I have never read, so I don't know. I'm not even sure what that's about, but I'm looking forward to getting into that book as well. So, Roadside Picnic, if perhaps you're coming from it, having seen the film Stalker or played the video game series, do not hesitate to read this book, even though, it's written a long time ago in another language and it's been translated multiple times. Get into it, because there's a lot there, and there's a lot to be salvaged, I should say. So get into it. Roadside Picnic, absolute classic. Thanks.